Good evening. Guatsi, Hinome Suchietsa. I am Nadine Grainig, and I am from the Pueblo of Laguna. And we are bringing to you another, excuse me, my hair's on my face, another Indigenous Perspectives discussion. And this one is on becoming an involved citizen. So today we're going to have Senator Sally Ann Gonzalez, Representative Arlando Teller, and new Pima County Recorder, Gabriella Cázares-Kelly. I hope I said that right. And I will be reading you their bios, but I just want to let you know that this is being brought to you by Save Our Schools Arizona Network. And Save Our Schools Arizona is about upholding and supporting and encouraging support of our public schools, our public school districts in Arizona. So that's who's bringing this to you today. So I will begin with Gabriella. She's she's a Pima County recorder. She grew up in the rural community of Pisimoho, Arizona, about 100 miles southwest of Tucson on the Tohono Nation. She moved to Tucson as a teenager and she's lived there ever since. Gabriella received her Bachelor of Arts in Secondary English Education from the University of Arizona and later earned a master's degree in Educational Leadership for Community College and Higher Education from Northern Arizona University. She was a member of the Arizona Board of Regents Academic Advising Articulation Task Force for 9 years and is currently an advisory board member for the Education Policy Center at the University of Arizona. Gabriella is a co-founder of Indivisible Fano, a grassroots community organization that is focused on providing opportunities for education and civic engagement for members of the Tohono Nation. She is committed to creating and transforming spaces to include Indigenous voices and the voices of those who are historically underrepresented in Pima County. In 2019, she was named Arizona AFL-CIO's Community Activist of the Year. So welcome, Gabriella. Next, we have Representative Arlando Teller. He's a member of the Navajo Nation. In 1995, he graduated from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, becoming their first Native American graduate. In 2009, after working for the City of Phoenix's Aviation Department and Aviation Management and Aviation Management intern for Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport, Teller returned to the Navajo Nation as a senior transportation planner for the Navajo Nation Division of Transportation. He was eventually promoted to Deputy Division Director for the Transportation Division. Representative Teller is a Democrat member of the Arizona House of Representatives representing District 7 since January 4th, 2019. Teller was elected in 2018 to succeed retiring state representative Winona Banali. After being elected, Teller became a sitting member on the Land and Agriculture Committee and the Transportation Committee. So welcome, Representative Teller. And finally, we have Senator Sally Ann Gonzalez. Senator Gonzalez is a citizen of the Pascoyaqui tribe of Arizona. She is a former tribal council member and public school educator, becoming the first Indigenous woman to be elected to the Arizona State Legislature in 1996. Senator Gonzalez is chair of the Indigenous Peoples Caucus and sits on the Commerce and Education Committee and is the ranking member of the Higher Education and Workforce Development Committee. At the national level, she is the chair of the Governmental Advisory Committee for the Environmental Protection Administration. As a former classroom teacher, Senator Gonzalez continues to be a strong proponent for quality, equitable education for all. She continues to advocate for children, women, and elders. Senator Gonzalez has sponsored and/or co-sponsored legislation to improve the lives of women and children and continues to support health care for all. So welcome, Senator Gonzalez. You look like you're in a cold place.
It's a cold day. I am in a cold place.
Well, you're all bundled up. Yeah. So let me go ahead and allow each of you to say a little bit of something about yourselves, introduce yourselves, cover something I may not have covered in your bio, So we'll start with Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you. Thank you, first of all, for the invitation of being on this Zoom meeting to provide our perspective on the issue of, participating and just the elections and all that happened in the last year. Anyway, um, I'm sorry, Nadine, that we didn't update my profile before today, but my new committees for this legislative session is ranking member on education and a member of the Health and Human Services Committee in the Senate. And 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 last week we had elections, and Senator Peshlikai, Jamesita Peshlikai, became our new chair for Indigenous Peoples Caucus, and Ms. Representative Sosi is our vice chair of the Indigenous Peoples Caucus. So I apologize for not updating you or updating my profile. I'm gonna have to get on Christina. Blame Christina
That's
on
right.
that.
Blame your assistant.
Yeah. But let's see. Just really happy to be here today to just add to all of our perspectives on the importance of what we do ongoing and going forward, and on really giving a voice for Indigenous people, especially here in the state of Arizona. I know some of our voices go beyond our state and onto the national level, but I think what's really important is what we do in our own backyard, and so that's important. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Teller. You're on mute. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, this is Arlando. I'm originally from Chinle, and as shared by Nadine, I'm a proud graduate now of not only of Chinle Public School, but also Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, graduating there as the first Native American to graduate from an aviation university. And other issues, the committees that I'm on this session are the Transportation Committee, as I have 26 years with transportation industry experience, Land and Agriculture and Rural Affairs, as I live in the rural part of Arizona, and definitely supportive of public schools and the teachers, the counselors, and the maintenance staff, janitors, staff that work in our schools that keep our children safe and protected and educated. Thank you.
Thank you. So do we call you Recorder Cázares? I'm not saying it right. Cázares-Kelly or just Gabriella?
Gabriella is fine. And it's Cázares-Kelly. Skuktash Anyan Yapchugi Gabriella Cázares-Kelly, Bismo Ochkup Amjad. Good day. My name is Gabriella Cázares-Kelly. I'm from the communities of Bismo and Cook, which are located on the Thanatam Nation right here in beautiful Pima County. And I am an educator. I have actually also been a classroom teacher, teaching high school English several times throughout my career, an academic advisor, a substitute teacher, and a college and career readiness counselor. And so I've kind of been all over the spectrum in both the high school level and in these higher education in community college, tribal community college. So I'm very happy to be here. Very excited to weigh in. Education has changed drastically, even in just the year that I have left the classroom. And but I am I'm still a dues-paying Red for Ed teacher, educator, and am still a part of the union, and care so much about education, and I think it leads into so much with our civic engagement. A lot of that is happening and starting in our classrooms and on our campuses. So I'm very happy to be a part of this. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. We're happy to have all of you. And yeah, you're exactly right. Good things can come from bad things, bad events. You know, it's getting us more aware of the importance of voting and other ways that you can become civically engaged. And I think a lot of our youth are now a lot more engaged than I know I was when I was a younger person. So we have a lot of questions to go through, a lot of good, rich discussion I'm expecting to have. And if people have any questions, our Save Our Schools IT expert, Kate Tice, will feed those to me, and then we'll be able to, you know, pass those on to you. But let's get started, because yeah, there's going to be a great, like I said, discussion here. So before we get into the what I call the nitty gritty, please share how you became interested in running for office. So you can raise your hand if you're eager to talk, or I can call on you, where you want to go.
You can call on us. I don't know.
Okay, well, I want to start. I'm going to start with Gabriella because she's the most recent. I mean, is this? I'm sorry, somebody else talking?
No.
Okay.
No. So how did we get interested in running for office?
Yes.
For me, it was a little bit accidental, actually. It was a two-part thing. Number one, I wanted to just help get folks registered to vote when I was working at Thornton Community College, and I started being out in the community, literally registering voters. And so I was really interested in this office in general because I had to reach out and ask questions all the time. And so I was really paying attention to any bit of news that came out from this office, the recorder's office, anything they put on their social media, what other people were doing in different counties, you know, that were similar, or in Indian voter registration. And so I was just really interested overall in that way. But the other way that I was got kind of roped in, and I think this is what happens, is you show up to meetings. You show up to a meeting and you start listening and you meet people who are interested in positive community change. And I was really fortunate to be in community with the other members of my community organization, Indivisible Tono, largely Native women and Native women led. And we would go into places and we would say, you know, that person doesn't know more than we do. We could do that. We could run for this position. And it was a lot of conversation of that. Like, we belong everywhere that there's decision making that is happening. So why not?
Yeah, why not exactly? And I'll let you in on a secret. We invited Arlando just so we had a male representative. No. I'm kidding. But quite often, yeah, you do find women together, working together for a common cause, especially in education, I think. But we need the men too. So Arlando, you want to tell us how you got roped in or encouraged to run for office the first time?
Number one, I sincerely appreciate the two ladies, the stateswomen that are on the call with me, as well as you, Nadine. I think representation does matter. Being seen in a public realm, regardless of our background, it's really important that our youth see that I can be like Gabby. If she if she could do it, I can be like Sally. You know, the representation does matter for us, particularly in Indigenous communities, where in some of the communities, it's matriarchal, matrilineal. And in Navajo, matriarchal, matrilineal society, I had a very good counsel. And she would tell me, son, you need to listen to the community. Don't talk back. Don't ever talk back to a woman, she would say to me. Because that woman may be a mother to a son that has the same questions that you have. And so having that staunch, stoic matriarch in my life for the past 47 years has taught me a lot. She brought me home when I lived in San Francisco. I lived there for 10 years. And she said, by golly, it's time to bring my son home. And she did. There's a long story to that, but on the way home, she said to me, the reason why I'm bringing you home is because all the experience that you have gained, the transportation experience, working with different nationalities, you have had this basket, son, and all that experience is in this basket. All that knowledge is in this basket. Come home, pour it on the ground, and help us get out of the mud. And so this crazy old lady, my mom, who passed last month from COVID,
Oh, I'm so sorry.
she was the reason for my public service. When I would work at Navajo DOT as a senior planner, as a department manager for airports, and as a deputy director, I heard from the communities the dire need for fixing the road, fixing the bridges. And those issues turned into community-based transportation plans. And so with that knowledge and knowing the need, also she was a social worker. So I understood the issues and concerns from the social work discipline, caused me to run for office. Because I do believe, and the three of us here on tonight do believe, no matter how much we can do or how much we are against as challenges, even a tiny footstep forward is progress for our communities. Vocalizing our advocacy for our community is progress for us. So I applaud the women on the call tonight. They're facing challenges, unprecedented challenges, people of color, and just like them, we've had enough. Education is important for us. We hear it in our prayers and our stories, and we're on tonight for that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. That's very powerful. Sally, would you like to share how you got into politics?
Yes. Thank you both, Gabby, Gabriella. I've known Gabby for a long time, and she went to school with my daughters, and so that's why I can call her Gabby. and thank you, Representative Teller, for sharing your story. I became an advocate, almost as long as you've been alive, Representative Teller, because I didn't realize I have a daughter almost your age. And when you become a parent, you want the best for your children. And so when our eldest started kindergarten, that's when I became a school advocate and just wanted the best for her. And as my other daughters came along, I wanted the best for them as well. But I also wanted to share, I don't think I've shared this with Nadine, and I think I've shared it with other people, but uh, I also had a great mom that really instilled the community uh, advocacy in me from a little girl, and her mother as well. And they were they my grandmother was a social worker, but she didn't go to school to become a social worker. She was just a social worker, and as a matter of fact, help really the real school social worker get information to the Yaqui community in my hometown of Guadalupe, in the Phoenix area. And so, and then my mom learned from her, um, and I learned from my mom, and both those ladies were really instrumental in inspiring, and or as for me to aspire. Well, actually, I never aspired growing up. I wanted to be like mom and grandma, but I never aspired to become a politician. And 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 I don't even like the word politician, but it is what it is. And but I prefer to call myself a policy maker, policy changer, because in my arena we have to, and being in the minority at the state legislature, first in the House and for many years, and now in the Senate, is I'm still in the minority. Um, and we have to really our biggest role is to stop bad legislation, and also to change bad policy, to to really serve all Arizona citizens, and not just a few, and not just the privileged. And so that is our role here. That has been my role as a legislator, is to make some of those changes, or at least try to make. And we have made some good changes. For example, approving um, the children's chip program years ago, and then expanding it later. Also the Medicaid program in the health arena, in education. Uh, we haven't been as successful as we would like to be, and really, uh, that is my biggest thing that I you know my husband and I have 27 grandchildren. And the reason I still do this work, even though I started 20 some years ago, is because I see them on a daily and um, weekly, and the struggles that they're having at school, especially now with COVID and remote learning. But but it is because I see them and their struggles that I continue to do this work, because it was teaching in a classroom setting, some almost 30 years ago, that really prompted me to become to run for office. And and um, because our children in my classroom, and my daughters being part of that school that I was teaching in, at least three of them at the time, they were not being supported. Their education was lacking. The support just wasn't there for our community children at Lawrence Elementary. And that's what prompted me to run for Pascuayaki Tribal Council, served there 4 years. And we did a lot of work, and we actually did the first intertribal, actually intergovernmental agreement with TOSD, to really work together to do between the Pascuayaki tribe and TOSD, to really share information, to be able to really help our children succeed. And even though that was a long time ago, uh, and they still have an intergovernmental agreement on IGA, we still have, and we've made some inroads into what we started a long time ago, there's still a lot of work to, you know, our children are still lagging behind academically, and we're working with TUSD now, the tribe is, and I am, so that we could really close that gap that our Indigenous children, not only at TUSD, but all over the state have, that they have, the gap that they have between the Indigenous children and their peers, especially their non-Indigenous or white peers in our schools in Arizona.
Yeah, and that is why our public schools are so important, that they need the support, because most of our children do go to public schools, our Indigenous children. Thank you so much for sharing and give us a little bit of history too. The fight does go on, and we can't stop. So thank you for all of for answering that question. We're almost halfway through our hour. Only got one question so far. So, so I'm going to handpick you, I think, in the interest of time, to maybe answer some individual questions. And of course, if you have anything to add, feel free to chime in as well. So as we mentioned before, maybe some younger people are actually getting or got more involved in this last election in 2020. So, but there were others, of course, older people, maybe people who never voted before, although they've been able to. So why do you think more Native Americans took their voices to the polls in the 2020 election cycle? Arlando, what do you think?
I thank you for that question. I think this past 4 years has not only emphasized the disenfranchisement of our communities throughout the United States and within Arizona. We as Native people saw that, read that, and activated it. We saw the efforts to make it harder for us to vote. We saw the efforts for us the challenges. We saw the challenges. And we are resilient. The Native folks that are on this call and that are watching and listening, we come from, and I say this to my grandchildren and my children, the blood that flows in our vein survived thousands, hundreds of years of persecution. And so we are resilient people. We're smart enough to know when a challenge is coming towards us. And those that are active become more active. And as close as our communities are, as family, friends, colleagues, we get everyone involved. Be it a community event, ceremony, you have food there, everyone's there. They listen to us and our concerns. So I think these past 4 years have made it a lot, unfortunately, easier for us to know that we have to do something about this. We have to stand up, activate, and ensure that grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, even 21-year-old cousins in the community need to vote. And these are the reasons why. And so they heard us. Mm-hmm. They certainly heard Gabby. She did a phenomenal job making sure that her voice was out there. And folks like her throughout Indian country and in this country really activated our Indigenous voice at a community level. Mm-hmm. And we weren't wrong. We saw it, we heard it, we experienced it. And so that, I think, is a tremendous accolade. So thank you for those that have stepped into that line of activism on behalf of your communities. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm just going to share a few stats here. So in the presidential election alone for 2020, according to High Country News, Native Americans were key to Biden's upset victory in Arizona. Indigenous people comprise nearly 6% of Arizona's population. So that's about 425,000 people as of 2018. And eligible voters on the Navajo Nation, where Representative Teller is from, are about 67,000. So you can imagine, with all the close races that we had this last year, 67,000 voters can make a big difference one way or the other. And the margin, when votes are still being counted in November, between Trump and Biden was 17,131 votes for Biden. And in some Thon Otham Nation precincts, where Gabriella is from, Biden and Harris won 98% of the vote. So that's huge. That's a huge impact. And, had a lot to do with Arizona turning blue. And again, we're bipartisan. Save Our Schools is bipartisan. I'm just telling you what happened. So those numbers were repeated throughout Wallapai, Havasupai, White Mountain Apache, Gila River, San Carlos, and many other communities throughout Arizona. And those are tribes, for those of you who aren't familiar. They ranged between 70 and 90% for Biden. So yeah, made a big difference. And now we're in a new legislative session in Arizona. And so, the work goes on. So.
Hey, Dean.
Yes.
I wanted to add, I agree with Representative Teller and thank you for sharing data with us. I think I've been doing, voter registration and getting out the vote for a long time, and working with tribes. And I think that tribes have been progressively every year getting better at getting out the vote and registering people. But also the pandemic really gave an avenue for reaching more people through Zoom meetings and whatnot. So I think those were things that, and the tribes. I know my tribe, Pasquayaki, did a tremendous job in getting out the vote this year. They stepped up to the plate, even bigger than 4 years ago. And so I think kudos to all the tribes who did their part in getting out the vote.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And that's a good segue to another question I had regarding the pandemic. COVID-19 apparently had a huge impact on the vote, in part because of how our government responded to the pandemic. And obviously, if you read the papers at all or watch TV at all, you know that Navajo Nation has had the worst cases, the highest number of cases of COVID. And that got national attention for a change, to some of the challenges that are on our reservations, the lack of electricity, internet connectivity, good, clean drinking water readily available, those kinds of things. So as I said before, some good things can come out of the bad. And good things are that there are people are paying attention now, finally, to things that have been going on for centuries. So with civic engagement, like voting, do you think when COVID is under control and people can socialize again and meet face to face again, do you think the participation in politics or any other level of civic engagement will go down? Gabby, what do you think? I'm sorry, we became really good friends just now and I called you Gabby. So Gabriella, what do you think?
I think that what happened, especially with COVID, is it really magnified all these disparities. And we're seeing this reliance on our government infrastructures like we've never seen. Before we might have just been kind of dismissive of it. Oh, it doesn't really matter. It's not really a big deal. But then when you're literally talking about, how can I get a test and your local government is the ones administrating the free tests, or you're suddenly worrying about healthcare, and you can't just handle the pain and limp along. When it's so much in your face. Right now we're awaiting vaccines, and we're seeing who is being allocated money and who isn't being allocated, and we're seeing our schools being opened or closed or half hybrid, we don't know, and that's our children. And so we're literally seeing government structures responsible for life or death decisions. And so I think a lot of times, especially with the Native community, we have kind of, as a whole, maybe felt like we didn't want to participate because it maybe didn't impact us, like we were going to be forgotten either way. And so when you see a direct connection between the leaders that you elect and whether or not your family receives funding or healthcare or vaccines in this very critical time, I think that you suddenly are paying attention. And, we've always known it. We've always known that there's been that connection, but I think people are more motivated. And one of the things, like with voting and participating in all of these things, a lot of people really want to point their finger and say, well, Natives haven't been voting or Latinos haven't been voting. And they always want to point the finger, but we have to remember that we're not starting from the same starting line that everybody else is. We just passed 2020, which is the anniversary of women having the right to vote, women's suffrage. But really what that's talking about is white women. That didn't include our grandmothers. That didn't include the women from our tribes. We didn't have that until 1942. And, we just passed Dr. Martin Luther King's holiday yesterday. We didn't have the right to have our votes protected until 1965, after the paving of of that legislation through the Civil Rights Act. But we also, my grandma didn't speak English, so she didn't have protections until 1975. We're not starting from the same starting lines as everybody else, but once we do, when we have people, it's said that if you vote in 3 consecutive elections, that you will be a lifetime voter. And so if this is the first time that we have gotten so many Native people to come out and vote for the first time, we've demystified what the voting process is like. We have helped people overcome barriers while simultaneously making the connection between their everyday life and who they're electing into office. This is the beginning of this shift. And I think it is going to continue. Even looking at just the numbers of people who are tuning in on our Facebook Live right now, people are interested and they care. And so now they can figure out a way to take them caring and actually turn it into an action that can benefit our communities. So I think that's going to continue.
Yeah, good. I think so too, and very hopeful of that. So you kind of answered one of the other questions I had was, what do you tell somebody when they say, "Oh, politics doesn't affect me"? Well, politics or political activism or whatever you call it happens at all different levels, right? It goes down to who you vote for your school board. So it can go down to that close to you. Who's going to represent the school that your children go to, and that has an impact on your children. So. You look like you want to say something else.
I always go with the example of the roads. So where my community is on the Thanata Nation, we have these beautiful monsoon storms that come out, and right away we get flash floods, which the schools have to send their students home before the buses get stuck at a wash. And so it's a huge thing that happens. Pretty much the whole Thanata Nation shuts down and people drive home, because otherwise they may be sitting on one side of a wash for 6 to 8 hours, maybe longer, And, they're just stuck there. And so we tend to think of these things as like an inconvenience. It's like, oh, well, what else were you going to do? You can just sit there and wait and play on your phone, or just, wait until the water runs down.
Mm-hmm.
But if you really think about the idea of, what if your loved one was experiencing a medical emergency and they were on one side of that wash, and on the other side were the emergency personnel that could save their lives. And in between was a 50-foot wash that is 5 feet high with water that was strong enough to carry away a vehicle. And there's no way to cross, but we have the technology. The technology exists. If we had the money to fix that road, we could do it, because we don't have that problem here in town. But we have this on the res. And somebody makes a decision about how much money is allocated to fixing that road, whether or not it is going to get fixed, or whether or not your school children are going to be stuck for 12 hours on one side of that wash, or your loved one is going to have a wash in between them and medical care. So essentially what we're picking is somebody who is going to make the decision that is going to result in lives, and whether or not we deserve to live or die. And so when we talk about it like that, voting isn't the most important thing you can do. It's the least that you can do if you have the right and you have the privilege of voting. And the most important thing would be to get involved and ask and demand for that road to be fixed.
Wow, if I weren't already a voter and active, I would become active after that. Thank you. Very powerful words. And yeah, you have to bring it down to a personal level for a lot of people who don't already know or didn't get that background in their education as to why it's so important. There are many ways that a citizen can be an involved citizen, like building coalitions, managing conflict peacefully, petitioning, speaking or testifying before public bodies. So before people like Senator Gonzalez and Representative Teller. So there are ways that we can find out how to find out about this through Save Our Schools Arizona. We've got on our website, we've got instructions as to how to request to speak at our legislature. And so, so it's not just about voting, it's about influencing people who make decisions on behalf of you. And so I wanted to ask Congresswoman Gonzales and Representative Teller, are there any bills that have been introduced or you foresee being introduced in this legislative session that directly impact Indigenous people in Arizona?
Absolutely. Besides our bills that we run that affect state laws, affect everybody every day, almost every day of their lives. For example, I live on Pascuayaki, and our reservation is small, and we don't have a grocery store, and so I have to go into town as soon as I cross the border from my reservation into Tucson or the county line. All the state laws affect me. How fast I'm going, whether I have insurance on my car or not, because by law I'm supposed to. All kinds of things. But the best way that I like to describe and get kids to learn about this when I'm talking to school age little ones is I tell them I make the laws of Arizona, and how about if I introduce a law that would have you going to school 365 days a year, or that you have to go to school until you're 25. And they say, oh, no, how do we get you not to do that? I'm going to vote no on those bills. And that really gets them talking and going. And so absolutely, I like to tell them that state laws affect their lives every day, especially school children, especially on school, and how long they have to go, and how many days in a year they have to go to school.
Great, thank you. Again, that's a practical example that gets them directly connected to what's happening in my life. I don't want to go to school that long or that often, or at least I want to have the choice and not have it
Exactly.
imposed on me. So Representative Teller, specifically in this legislative session, what should people be aware of? Native American people, Indigenous people in this state be aware of that they should maybe follow and track and see how it's doing?
Thank you for that question. There are several bills that I have been reading that may have direct impacts to our public schools. As you've been hearing on discussion tonight, issues such as the charter schools funding, as well as specific attacks on Proposition 208 that we need to pay attention to. So those are the two that I feel I will be focusing on. The people have spoken. The state citizens, residents of Arizona have spoken and have voted in support of Prop 208. So any efforts to mitigate or lessen the impact that we voted on, we need to pay attention to that. The bills that I'm going to be sponsoring, one of them is a regalia bill. As you know, in the state of Arizona, a Native child who is celebrating a graduation achievement, some school districts will not allow our children to express their individual cultural significance of walking the line in their regalia. And that is it's so shameful. As first people of this state and this nation, we are not allowed to celebrate, and our children not to celebrate an achievement. So that is one of the bills that I'm going to be sponsoring. Another one is a technology-based education bill. And I just reminded myself I need to send the language over to SOS to review. But basically that is allowing a technology laptop program service for kindergarten and first grade only. And it allows improvement to a young child's vocabulary, reading comprehension, math, and science abilities, preparing them for kindergarten and first grade. I think we need to consider how we can prepare our children, particularly kindergarten, pre-K, into performing better with their cohorts, regardless if it's public, charter, or private. I think it's important to increase the confidence of our young youth when they go to school, particularly in these tender ages of kindergarten and first grade. But back to the question, any efforts to review any sliding of Prop 208 is very important for us to understand. So thank you.
Nadine,
Thank you.
let me add one big one that I think is, well, not that I think, that I know is going to be affect all our Indigenous communities around the state is Indian gaming, and the compacts that are going to be signed by the governor with them. And as a matter of fact, bills are going to start dropping next week on them. And for just the people that are watching, it's important because some of the Indian gaming that goes to the state goes to education, but also in our communities, in my community in particular, our our gaming revenue goes to education, to healthcare, to social services, to housing, and it all goes back to providing services that our community is very much in need of. And so those are important. All 22 tribes would be affected by this. Not all 22 Arizona tribes have a casino, but all 22 Indian tribes have machines that are allotted to them, and so they are in the arena of Indian gaming, and it's important for our communities.
I wasn't aware that there were machines assigned for to all
Yep.
tribes. So every tribe does benefit from casino revenue. Wow.
Absolutely.
Great. I learned something. Yay.
Yay.
I thought I knew everything. Obviously, I don't. But thank you for sharing that. Now, I did not, in the interest of time, I didn't share too much about myself like I normally do. I am the tribal outreach coordinator for Save Our Schools Arizona, but for about a year now. Before that, I was the director of Indian education for the state of Arizona. I also founded a nonprofit organization called the Southwestern Institute for the Education of Native Americans, or Sienna for short. When I was the director of Indian education, and I talked to different people about gaming revenues, and I couldn't understand why, when the compacts were negotiated, why none of the revenues went directly to help Indigenous students. The money, as you said, it's raised, and it's 12% of the revenue currently, I think, goes out to districts, public school districts across the state, and then they can do with it what they want. It doesn't necessarily benefit the Native students in those school districts. And certainly there's nothing that has been identified specifically of that 12% to go directly to helping Indigenous students, even though it's their tribe or the Native casinos that are generating the revenue. So I always ask that question of different tribal leaders when I came across them. And I even asked somebody in Oklahoma how their compacts were written, and they said the same thing. They have nothing set aside specifically for their Native students. And I said, why not? And he said, we felt we were lucky enough just to get approved to get the casinos. So I don't know if that was the case in Arizona or not, but when these compacts are being negotiated again, even though I'm not the director anymore, I would love to see an argument made for some of that money to go directly to at least high density schools. So those schools that have 25% or higher Native American enrollment. That's my 2 cents worth regarding casino revenue. So we've got about 5 minutes left. And I think we covered most of the questions I had, except I just, let's make it really basic right now for young people who are listening, who are in our audience, who maybe weren't even old enough to vote in November, but either they have become of age to vote or they will soon. What would your best advice to them be to get involved at a political level or an activist level? Anybody want to tackle that real quick? Gabby, you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. First of all, it's really important to know that whether or not you are a citizen, whether or not you are registered to vote, no matter what, you have the right to contact your representatives and the people who serve you. We work for you. So that is something that's really important to know. It is really, really easy to get involved if you start showing up to meetings. And, you know, all of these meetings are public. They have to be public. And right now, because of COVID, you can a lot of times attend your school board meetings online, or your supervisors meetings online, or you can go to any, you can go and listen to any representative speak. And so it's really, really important to do that and start showing up in spaces. And it's really, really helpful if you take a friend. One of the things that I share a lot and I talk about a lot is that we are dominated by spaces that were not designed for us. And on top of that, we're designed to keep us out. We're very much dealing with a lot of white supremacy out there. But everywhere you go, you're on traditional land. So you belong everywhere you go. And you just need to make sure that you make space for yourself in any of those spaces. Show up to a meeting, keep showing up, be the pebble in somebody's shoe, and raise your hand and ask questions.
I like that, be a pebble in somebody's shoe or the sand in the oyster or whatever it is to, to make a pearl. So Representative Teller, did you want to add anything to that? What would you tell a new voter?
I would echo what Gabrielle mentioned and shared. I think it's important for the new voter to understand that their voice is important, and encouraging them that their seat at the table, they have to make room for themselves and enjoy the meal at the seat of the table. I think for so many generations, we have been pushed out of the seat at the table, and we are now making our voices very much heard, and definitely be that thorn in one side or pebble in the shoe. So that's very important. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We did have a question on the regalia bill. What is the number of that bill?
I will get that to you. You can view my bills on averyleg.gov. Go to House Member, and then you can search for me, Arlando Teller. Click on my name, scroll down, and then you'll see the bill listing. What I do is click on either to filter. I ask for prime bills that I primed, and you'll see a listing of my bills. And I'll share that on and I think I've shared that on my Facebook post, listing of my bills. So I've introduced, I would say, over 20 bills, and I don't know each number personally, but I know the content of those bills listing that I have. Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you for the question. We also had a positive comment. Thank you for the privilege of listening to your concerns on Native children's education. So, well, that's all the time that we have for this evening. Again, the time goes by quickly, and there's a lot to talk about, a lot to cover. But I think we covered a lot today. There's a lot of food for thought for our audience. And we just really appreciate everybody tuning in. If you know of somebody who was interested in participating, but they were not able to, we actually do record these on YouTube, and Save Our Schools Arizona has a YouTube page or links or whatever they're called. I'm not the IT person, so but you can hear not only this one, but past Indigenous perspective sessions. Our next one will be on the 27th. And that will be, the subject is living in two worlds. So we're going to have 3 college graduate students talking about what it's like to live in a Native community and also operate and live in the dominant society, and going back and forth and the challenges that lie in that. So again, thank you so much, everybody. I really, really appreciate your time. I learned a lot, and I hope our audience did too. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.